on the hillside. Little boxes made of.
I'm Jane Garrity, and welcome to my podcast. A Gift of Time is my memoir. I share my experiences through generational trauma, abuse, PTSD, and my spiritual awakening and how I healed. Thank you for listening. If my story resonates with you, it will resonate with others you know. Please share it. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode. Episode 8, 2019. I parked at the trailhead parking of Red Rock Canyon Open Space, Section 16, at 6 a.m., hoping to get acclimated to the elevation, not even realizing I picked an 11-mile loop. I dropped a pin and a text to my mother so she would have my location via my phone. I was traveling and hiking alone, and if I became lost, injured, or worse, abducted by a mountain lion, my mother could send it to search and rescue. I made sure my whistle was easily accessible by hanging it on my pack at my shoulder. I was acutely aware that I was the first soul on the trail that morning. It only took about 2 minutes into the trail and I was already out of breath. 1 foot in front of the other. It's not a race. As I began to steady my pace and enjoy the beauty of it all, I thanked myself for this gift. I had finally put myself in a good financial situation, saving money, paying down debt, raising my credit score, and was able to buy myself a townhome in Milford, New Hampshire. It took me 8 years after my divorce to get back on my feet financially. Defaulted school loans, leaving everything I owned except clothes to my ex-husband and kids, not able to support myself while paying child support, and the collections on my credit from leaving a relationship and lease while he stayed back and neglected to pay the rent. So it had defaulted to me, and I certainly paid that price for several years later. Financial wounds aren't typically something we consider to be a trauma. But when I think back to all of the times that I had no money left over and living on ramen and cans of tuna, I was still abundant. That 99-cent package of ramen noodles was my dinner a few nights a week. If I had bread, tuna, and eggs, I felt rich. I would go to work every day, and no one knew. I would eat the free work lunches as often as I could, and I never went hungry. When I signed the papers at the title agency, I had felt a newfound freedom that I didn't know existed within me. Miss Independent. When I found out about my 30th high school reunion happening that summer, I thought, I want to go, but what's in it for me? I had decided, after I purchased my home, that I would no longer spend my precious PTO for someone else's vacation, meaning I would only decide to spend my hard-earned money if there was something in it for me. I had spent decades using my precious time off for others, and it was time that I spent it for myself instead. Since my divorce, I have had Colorado in my mind and heart. I had no idea why. I just knew that it was a place that I wanted to live. It was as if something in the cells of my body were emanating the call. I had applied for jobs back in 2012 after my divorce, but I got cold feet. I wasn't ready, and I didn't have the money. Now, after all those years, I've gained some independence, freedom, and what I like to call good old-fashioned gumption. My reunion would be in Albuquerque, and I thought, what if I flew to Denver, rented a car, and did what I wanted, and then drove to Albuquerque and flew home from there? Brilliant. I would be able to have the experience I wanted in Colorado, finally, after all these years, and then still catch up with my high school friends. It sounded like a win-win to me. This would be the first time I've traveled completely solo, a trip just for me, not for work. I began planning it right away. After I moved into my new home, I began reflecting back on my relationships. I had joked years prior that I wasn't meant to be married and that I would end up having many love affairs instead. It was time for me to stop dating and to start living for myself. So, I adopted a dog. I wanted a companion, not a person. There isn't much risk of abandonment from a dog, I think. I found him through a rescue and someone that I worked with. Making the decision to adopt a dog out of a rescue is a big one. I knew that I would have my work cut out for me, but I didn't realize at the time that the connection we have with our animals is spiritual. The moment I saw his picture, I knew he was mine. I knew that we were meant to be together. When the woman who transported him dropped him off, he was emaciated, nothing but fur and bones. He had been in a kennel for more than 6 months and also had major digestional issues and wasn't able to keep anything in his body. He would jump on the coffee table, the counters, and one time he actually pulled the cast iron burner grates off of the stove. I had to keep him on a leash for almost 6 weeks to get him trained to be in a house. We had visits with vets and biosamples, and we were able to get his digestion system back in order, and he finally started putting on weight. We went to training classes together, and he started running with me in the mornings. I learned right away that it was me who needed training more than him. We bonded quickly, and that old cliche phrase of, "Who rescued who?" came to my mind. As I was slowly hiking my way up that trail on section 16, having to stop and catch my breath many times, I had realized there was someone behind me and catching up quickly by the sound of their footfalls. I kept going, one foot in front of the other. This is the secret to hiking, by the way. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll get to where you need to be. As I stopped at a steep incline, I turned around and I saw her. It was a woman who was much older than me, and before she passed me, we chatted a bit. She was catching her breath too. I told her I was from New Hampshire and finding my lungs after flying in the day prior. She was from the Springs and came up to hike this trail a few times a week. I let her pass. I kept going, slow as a snail. When I reached the summit, or high point, she was eating breakfast, and I joined her. We had a lovely conversation, and she told me about her partner's band and that they were playing Thursday evening at a coffee shop, and that I should stop by if I was still around. I said thank you, maybe I will. We went our separate ways, and as I was hiking the loop and she was just doing the shorter out and back, she said, "Watch out for mountain lions," as she headed the opposite way. I touched my whistle to make sure it was still there, wondering what the whistle would do anyway. Scare it off, I hope. It was not beyond me knowing that woman was the only other soul I saw that morning, and I'd be doing the loop on my own. Perhaps I'll put some bells on my shoelaces next time. The hike through the canyon was so beautiful. I wondered why I didn't live in Colorado yet. Nothing bringing me here yet, I guess. When I finished and left the trailhead, I went into Old Town to grab breakfast. Huevos rancheros, smothered with green chili, was complete nostalgia. A friend who used to live in Colorado Springs told me I must visit Manitou Springs. She thought it was a very Jane town and that I would like it. She was right. I walked around Manitou, in and out of the shops, restaurants, and the vibe was uber chill. I caught a glimpse of the incline and I decided I would accomplish it the next day. I visited some breweries and local joints and was also very careful about my drinking. I had traveled alone many times for work, and I'm very aware that a woman traveling alone is an easy target. My mother always taught me to be aware of my surroundings at all times, so maintaining some sobriety was important this trip. That evening was a Stanley Cup Finals and the Bruins were playing. I decided to find a spot closer to my Airbnb to watch and get dinner. As I bellied up to the bar and ordered green chili mac and cheese, I noticed an older woman walk in and sit at the bar and order a glass of wine. She was alone. We got to chit-chatting and come to find out she was from Ketchum, Idaho. I had told her that I had just visited there with my dad, and we went to visit Hemingway's grave and some of the other things we did. She remembered the family, his wife Mary, and their home in Idaho, and of his manner of death and the gossip. I remember thinking at the time, how coincidental to meet this woman sitting at a random bar in Colorado Springs talking about Ketchum and Hemingway. Nothing actually random. I woke early the next morning, still being on Eastern Time, and headed to Manitou Springs to attempt the stair climb of all climbs. The incline is a deep stairway built into an old rail system that is 2,000 feet in elevation gain in less than a mile. 41 to 68% steep grades and 2,744 steps. There were a few other packs of people that began with me, and I loved the collective positive reinforcements that we all gave each other as we would continue to pass each other over and over, frog hopping our way to the top. I finished in an hour and 15 minutes, Not too bad for a 48-year-old from sea level. The hike down was much more enjoyable, a long 3-ish mile winding descent, looking over Pikes Peak, Garden of the Gods, and the Springs. The true feeling of freedom in my life has been experienced during these moments of time, a small blip in our soul's journey, and being able to pause and recognize that feeling, the feeling that we all seek as humans, joy. We have a tendency to try to find this joy with other things outside of ourselves, though, through substances, relationships, money, work. But joy, the feeling of happiness and fulfillment, actually already resides within our hearts. I grabbed some pizza and a beer, then promptly headed over to the Garden of the Gods. I did the touristy trail and then also some of the other trails in the park. It was busy, but still very much worth the stop. Our country is so beautiful and vast, and each time I bear witness to it, I'm always in awe. The geological formations from red rocks jutting out of the foothills all along the Front Range look something like AI generated from another planet, not Mother Earth. When I got back to my Airbnb, I decided to head over to that coffee shop where the woman I met on the trail said her boyfriend's band was playing. I thought it'd be nice to mingle and meet new people. And when I walked in, she saw me immediately. I saw her and her crew, and we had a ball, drinking wine, telling each other our stories, and just enjoying life and human connection. She said they were planning on moving to Montana the next year, and we exchanged numbers, and we wished each other well. Getting to know my dog and train him and connect with him was a connection through our hearts that I was slowly becoming consciously aware of. I've had dogs before, but always from puppies. The bonding was easy. This time, it was different. Like any other relationship with people, we both had to learn to build trust with each other. I quickly realized he had the same wounds and trauma as I did. He had PTSD, anxiety, and was still easily startled all these years later. I made an agreement with him that no matter what happens, I will always come back for him. I will never leave him. I told him that if I ever don't come back to him, then it's because I was dead. I didn't know at the time, like I do now, that as souls, we make agreements with each other at a spiritual level. We will either fulfill agreements and move on, or consciously break them as we learn and grow and no longer match energy with that soul. It works the same with our pets and our children, our parents, all of our relationships. We both learned as we went. I was able to take off the leash in the house as he became more civilized. I had to learn that consistency over time is key. We went hiking together almost every weekend. I learned how to clicker train him, and he learned that I could be a leader. We made many mistakes along the way, and we learned something from all of them. I was up early and out of the Springs the next morning. I tapped into Google, breakfast burritos near me, and got off the highway in Pueblo. I have only heard concerning stories about Pueblo over the years, and they all came to mind when I was pulling up to a tiny hole-in-the-wall corner store just off the highway, just inside a local neighborhood. I went in, and it had a 2-chair waiting area and counter service only. Driving through Raton Pass and through the open desert is truly a sight to see. The beautiful high peaks in the distance and the vastness of the land is incredible. I rented a single-room Airbnb, the cheapest I could find. I was a guest in a woman's home. I had use of my own bedroom and bathroom, but her living room and kitchen were shared space. $35 a night? I didn't care. I would only be there to sleep and shower anyway. When I met up with my classmates, it was a fun feeling, the nostalgia, reminiscing about fun times, challenging times, and learning about each other all over again, but this time as adults. When your graduating class is only around 60 people from a small private school, and 40 of them show up, it made for some fun times. A few months after I adopted my coonhound, we were walking along the grass one Sunday afternoon in my new community. I had seen this man walking his dog from my patio doors, and I wondered what his story was. He had a long gray goatee that reminded me of ZZ Top. Did he live here? His dog is really cute. He always seemed in a happy mood. Little did I know, watching him with his dog, that he would later become my husband. When I looked into his eyes that first day, I knew. I knew at that very moment in time that he and I were connected at a soul level. I moved in a month later. People were shocked. Gasp. I'm finally feeling independence and freedom, and now I abandon my new home to move in with somebody I barely know? Yep. When we follow our heart, it is always in our highest good, even if that experience turns into a lesson. I had managed to talk a few classmates into a morning hike the next day, so we all got up early, piled into a car, and went up to Tent Rocks National Monument. Tent Rocks is a natural geological formation that was formed by volcanic eruptions that took place several million years ago. It's an excellent reminder of how little time we are actually here on this earth. Hiking through these phallic formations is truly a wonder. It was a win-win of a trip overall. I learned that solo travel allows us to learn about ourselves, about humanity, different communities, and that we are all in the same boat, just learning as we go. The same week my husband and I moved to Colorado, my cell phone rang. It was from the woman I met hiking in Red Rock Canyon that first day of my trip. I answered and said, "Hey, do you remember me?" I assumed it was a misdial, and I was correct. But she said, "Yeah, I do." I told her that I had just moved to Colorado that week with my new husband, and how wild things work in cycles. "Did you move to Montana like you wanted?" "No, COVID changed everything for them. They're still in the Springs." I began paying attention to these small synchronicities, like meeting the two women I met, one from Ketchum and the other a random call 2 years later. Randomly meeting my husband while out walking the dog, him deciding to pull over and say hi, out of character for him. Us together, deciding that it was time to leave New Hampshire and try a new way of living for ourselves and not anybody else. Coming to the understanding that our connection with our pets brings healing that we're not completely conscious of. Nothing in life is random. Everything is there for us to see if we pay attention. That solo trip is when I realized joy already resides within me, in my heart. In order to find that joy, I must listen to my heart and follow the breadcrumbs and see where it leads me. Reflecting back, I clearly see life's signs and synchronic patterns. They're there for us to help us wake up in this lifetime, tune in to our spirituality, leading with our hearts and not our heads. This concludes episode 8. Thank you for listening. Please follow, subscribe, and share. If my story resonates with you, it will resonate with someone you know. Thank you.
Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of